Hello and welcome back to Read Becca for my weekly chatty catch up on my reading. Let's talk about all the books I read, all the books I'm currently reading, and all the books I'm looking forward to reading. So I had a very good reading week, but I didn't read a ton of volume. So I have two kind of short books that I finished and I enjoyed them both. So that's great. And I've been reading a lot of short stories as well. So I will be coming back around to do short story wrap-ups, I think, as their own separate video. But the first book I read was The House of Rust by Khadija, Abdalla, Bajaber. And this kind of flew under the radar until it got nominated and won the Ursula Le Guin Prize last year in 2022, which was the first time that prize was awarded. And that's why I picked this up, and I really enjoyed it. This kind of reminded me, at least in the first half, of Kubo and the Two Strings, which is a movie that I really love. It's not quite as whimsical. This is a little bit more solid and heavy, I would say, in terms of the content. So we're following this character, Aisha, mainly. We get a couple other perspectives. One of them is a bird named Whitebreast and a boy in the area. And this is all set in a somewhat grounded Mombasa, but there's definite non-real things here. So it certainly has fantastical elements. And the author as well is Mombasan, and this is her debut. So we are following Aisha as her father has been lost at sea. He's a fisherman who has a certain calling to the sea where he is ever striving to go farther and farther, and he doesn't come back one day. And Aisha's grandmother is sure that he's probably gone. That's why he hasn't come back. He's dead. And they're waiting. If this is standard, they're in a fishing village, and kind of all of the shark hunters and fishermen in the area know her father's reputation, and so they think the only reason he would not be coming back is because he's dead. So they have the standard of waiting 5 days before they then have a funeral for him. And before that 5 days is up, Aisha is determined that she is going to go and find and rescue her father because he can't be dead. And so that's the main story at the beginning of this book, is her going on what turns into a somewhat magical journey on her own in a skeleton ship and with a talking cat. So for reasons that I don't think I ever quite comprehended, this talking cat kind of is her advisor and helper on this sea journey. Obviously you can see there's sharks, so she has this mystical journey over the sea in search of her father, where she encounters strange creatures of the sea. And so there's certainly a mythic element to this. There's a very, like, a legend aspect. I don't know how to express, but it's so woven into the culture of this area because it is such a fishing village that everyone just sort of has a shared vibe about how they treat the sea and their beliefs about it. Philosophers here or there in the undersea believe that some leviathans drag beings underwater because they feel it as an act of love. They feel that the place above water is some sort of hell and they must spring breathing things out of it. So I loved that element, that there is this sort of mythos really woven in. But on top of that, the prose level of the description of this area is so richly described. It's just really immerses you in this setting. So you can definitely get a sense of the place here. And in such a slim novel, that level of world building, even though it's based on a sort of a real place, is done so well in such a slim little volume. So I want to read just a couple passages so you can get a real sense of how the place is described and how tangible it really is. The sea smelled foul, as if it were turning out whatever dead things were rotting in its bed. Farther in the center of the creek was the unlucky sailboat, scaly with flaking paint, its sails looming skeletal, the bones of a body no one dared bury. And then there's one that's just describing the city before nighttime. The dogs had stopped baying after Isha time. The howls that had echoed the Mwadini had trailed into silence. Mombasa was ready to fall asleep. Pots and pans were returning where they hung. The bellies of boats rubbed the shore along drowsy currents, and the mattress beside her shifted, occupied. "Do you love my father?" Hababa tuned slowly to peer at Aisha in the darkness. I brought him into the world. He is this flesh. Do you think that he is dead? Death is his only excuse for not returning that I will accept, Hababa said. This is not the most action-packed story, though. In fact, the second half, it becomes very mundane. Most of the second half involves her, Aisha, having sort of a drive towards something. She wants to get somewhere. She wants to get to the House of Rest. She's trying to figure out, what is this place and how do I get there? But she's also just going about her normal day most of the time because she doesn't really know how to progress on that quest. And so the second half is really, really mundane. So I can see some people not feeling like that works as much as this total sea journey mythic aspect in the first half. But for me, it really worked because the writing was so there. I was very invested in the characters, and the bird, Whiterest, becomes a more prominent character in the second half. And so I think that picks up some of the mythic aspects that we were getting during the sea journey of having this crow as a major aspect in the second half. So I really enjoyed those characters and what it's doing with them. So the House of Rest, I think, is well worth the read and well worthy of the award. The characterization, I think, is very strong here for Aisha. I think I want to mention that she is definitely non-gender conforming throughout this story, and that's really layered into the character. I think there is a possibility to read her as queer. She's explicitly stated over and over she doesn't want to get married. She doesn't want to follow the traditional gender role. She has always followed her father into learning about fishing and being a fisherman, and so she doesn't want to become a wife and carer. And at times, you know, it sounds like maybe she is a person who is queer, who doesn't have the vocabulary for what her other options are, but she definitely does say, I don't want to marry a man, over and over. So I think she's an interesting character from that perspective. And then layering her character on with the descriptiveness of the atmosphere to this story, the whimsical, magical realism that's through all of this, I just loved it so much, and I am so excited to see whatever this author brings us next, because if this is a debut, like, it's very exciting that her work is going to be out in the world and hopefully get a beacon shined on it because of this award that it won. So really, really great stuff. Then I read Participation. I finished it, my first Coffee House Press novel, and I enjoyed this one as well. I don't actually know what this was about, though. This is extremely sort of experimental. It's got a lot of formatting strangeness. Oh, I should say it's by Anna Moschovakis, if you can't see it there. It is ostensibly maybe kind of speculative. I knew that going in, and that was much less of an element to this than I had expected. It's very mundane. We're getting glimpses into the life of this woman as she's just going about her day, kind of general millennial struggle type story in a contemporary setting, it seems. And she's talking through just general day-to-day happenings, her struggles with work. She refers to her boss as the capitalist, and their complex relationship that they have is not very linear. And she's also having this relationship that she is progressing with someone named S. And that is the strongest part of this for me, like the thing that impacted me the most, because S is someone she knows online, really, and hasn't ever met. And so she's really building up this relationship with this person who she doesn't even really know. And they're purely basing it on their conversations in email, really. And I want to read one passage about that and her reflection on how weird that is, and how becoming romantically interested in someone in that way is really odd. I have no expectation that S will write me back, but I find that I am having thoughts about them, and that the thoughts are, categorically speaking, more erotic than filial. I find that there is something very specific about having erotic thoughts concerning a person whose appearance is so wholly unknown to me, who is without, among other things, a communicated gender. I find that under the circumstances, certain body parts are easier to picture than others. The lips, the soles of the feet, the asshole, the shadowy region behind the ear. these become, when I think about S, the primary erogenous zones. So that's not something I've really thought about before, but obviously she is thinking through this relationship that she started with someone without actually having any information about their identity. So they don't have any identifiers at all, and yet is experiencing this strong connection. So I really enjoyed that. I enjoy the writing very much through this whole thing. Obviously from that little section that I read, there is a very strong voice to the writing. It's not flowery at all. I don't know how to describe it, but it definitely comes through that there is a consistent tone all the way through. Then I wanted to read it's a very short chapter. A lot of the chapters here are really short, and this one is almost formatted like poetry. So I'm not going to post the full text here, but I want to read this couple pages. I'm not going to report on the book I picked from the stack, opened and began to read, then put down, with its bright patterned cover, background lilac or rose, brighter flowers abstracted and bleeding to the edge, title scrolled in a deep orange red above in smaller lettering, the name of my faraway friend. I'm not going to copy his beautiful opening line about sexual pleasure and reading. I'm going to report telegraphically on the actual news, dominated today by the march of the white supremacists, the counter-march of the anti-white supremacists, the think piece about white supremacy, the behavior of the white supremacists, the behavior of the pigs, so like the behavior of the white supremacists, the behavior of the larger group of anti-white supremacists, who were, nonetheless, by the calculus of power, outnumbered. I've been avoiding the news in these news reports, reaching instead for the new, an attempt to pry it out from remains, from bibliomancy. You aren't surprised. You know by now how I am. I'm going to pick up the book again, the one with the pink cover, shiny, tear-proof, and read the second line, and then the third. So, yeah, I love the writing to this, and the commentary does keep going back to books, and it doesn't make any bigger point. There's a few lines that I just love. This one is just a sentence randomly. There is a stack of books on a coffee table, for example, an archive of future attention, or else a morgue. And that's so true of describing books. When we put piles of books, personally I have a lot of piles of books, I'm sure most of you do, but are we going to actually get to them, or are they going to stay in that pile forever? And I know many of us struggle with that. So there is a lot of self-reflection. I saw several people refer to this book as postmodern. I think in the style, it is very self-referential a lot of the time, and doesn't really go a lot of anywhere. Even once we do progress into kind of the more possibly speculative-y stuff that's going on, I'll try to insert something to show it takes a massive change midway when something has happened. It's some sort of natural disaster, but we don't really know. And the format of these reports of people being stranded places reminds me of, I think this is something that was done classically in a lot of novels, where any sort of place names or identifying information is blanked out. So you get blank avenue as a location, blank as a person's name, that sort of thing. And going back to what I was saying about how she's communicating with S without identifying information, it really just hit me how much those two things are connected. But there's not really any purpose for it in the book. So I don't know what that's trying to do, but it makes me think. A lot of this is about, like, it's written really beautifully. I loved reading it, and it made me think a lot, even though I don't know what it was trying to say to me necessarily. Once we get into that aspect of there's something bigger going on, clearly, it remains background that there is something bigger going on. And clearly the world's not behaving right. But having just gone through the pandemic, the way that it plays out in this book is so believable, because we stay focused on our main character, on mundane life, on just continuing to move forward, even though the circumstances seem to have changed around her. So I love that. I think that second half execution was done so well because of that, of having really had that experience of pandemic and everybody just continuing to plod along, even though things have gone kind of weird. There is a whole section of very short, even sometimes just one sentence, chapters where two people interacting are describing figures that they're seeing, and then we just get a drawing of these little random figures. and they didn't really ever have any meaning. So again, it's going back to them just sort of living normal lives, filling time, entertaining themselves however they will. Yeah, and so I think I enjoyed this very, very much. There is one thing I do kind of have to mention. This is supposedly having sort of a major element of love and anti-love as two groups. And love has sort of stopped meeting. Anti-love is a group that get together to talk about like self-love practices. Neither of those things actually felt like major elements to the book to me. It was much more about individuals and individual relationships and whatever the heck these two groups were. I didn't get that part at all. I think, though, everything I had seen about this did not indicate it was related to Anna Moschovakis' previous book at all. And I still don't know that it is, but drawing from that, her previous book was Eleanor, or the Rejection of the Progress of Love. So is that love of the title the group love that now in this book is no longer meeting, is deprecated in some way? Possibly, I don't know. As well, our character, who is mainly known as E, I think, and maybe Eleanor as well, is that the same character as the previous book that this author wrote? And are they linked in some way? I couldn't find anything that actually tells me that. So maybe had I read her other book, it would actually have some clue of what's going on here. But so far, I don't think I needed it. This is very conceptual and very, very, not surreal. I don't know if that's the word to describe it. It's disconnected. So you're reading almost like a series of clips from this life that's going on. And it's not a cohesive narrative, but it's still so great to read through and enjoy the writing, enjoy the experiences this person's having and the perspective. So yeah, I really liked it, but I didn't know what it was about at all. So those are what I finished this week. So what I have in progress now, River of Gods by Candice Millard is going to be my main focus. I'm only about 10% into this, and I have a 3-day weekend this weekend, so we're gonna really make some progress on this one. Bliss Montage by Ling. I started this as a collection of short stories. Really enjoying it so far. Tales from Gavagans Bar. I did not make any progress on this week. Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. I am doing great on this. We're about 40% in, and I've only got the audio for 4 more days, and then I will be switching to the print. And finally, The Best of World SF. This one I am still making progress slowly but surely with my buddy Reed. And I think I have one other book on ebook I am just about to finish. I'm in the final summary of Sun Tzu in Space, so that one should be coming up fairly soon, though it is quite long and dense. So as far as my weekend, as I said, I have a three-day weekend, so I will be reading a ton this weekend, I hope. My reading has not been good lately, though. I think I mentioned that up top, but yeah, I think last night I literally just read a 10-page story. I picked out the shortest story in the first little bit of Bliss Montage, and that was it for the entire day, because I have just not had the focus. I don't know what's going on, but my reading focus is completely shot. So I've been sitting down and reading for a very long period and not really making a ton of progress. So we're gonna try to get outside, walk, listen to audiobooks, because it's actually sunny and chilly, but not freezing cold outside. So we'll try and do that, get in some audiobook time, do some puzzling, and try to get my brain back on track a bit. As well, I would say I do think that everything that's been going on emotionally recently has definitely affected me. So I think I'm probably in that sort of slumpy depression territory, coming out of grief into depression, which is fine. It's very novel as a person who does have chronic lifelong depression. It's always interesting and novel to feel depression for a reason and like actually be able to go, oh yeah, there is something actually wrong. So yeah, kind of coming out of grief, as I said, and into just feeling very subdued. But I think on top of that, there has just been so much going on in the world generally, like not personally impacting me in any way. I'm very fortunate for that, but there are so many really negative, terrible things. It does just sort of reach a point of compassion fatigue. So I think that's sort of weighing on me as well, that it's just a lot to process, to know where to put your energy toward, because there are people being affected by disasters around the world. It feels like never-ending amount of just really terrible stuff coming at you all the time anymore. And recently that has definitely been getting to me. So I think that's a big part of why I'm not reading. And if you've seen, I've done previously a book about reading slumps, and I don't think I'm quite to slump territory yet. But my first advice on dealing with reading slumps is to kind of self-assess if that's where you're at, if mentally you are having some depression or struggling with the world. And that's probably where I'm at. And so I'm going to follow my own advice on that aspect and be kind to myself and not really worry about it. And I will get out of it soon, I'm sure. So that's pretty much it for my week. I hopefully will be reading some more. I do need to actually make it out over the 3-day weekend to start looking at stuff for flooring and kitchen. I had been putting this off for a very long time, years, almost 10 years. When I bought my house, I desperately needed to replace the carpet. It was pretty bad then, and it now is just horrible. But my dog was terrified of hard floor, and so I definitely wanted to replace the carpet with hardwood. So now that my dog is gone, I'm able to do that. So I'm going to start doing that, but it makes most sense to get the whole kind of living room, kitchen area all done in the same hardwood and redo the kitchen at this point at the same time, because obviously you want to kind of tear out cabinets to get the flooring done under there and whatnot if you can. Yeah, so I have no idea what I'm doing. I have not done any major renovations on my house because this was kind of the one thing that really needed to happen first. I have done some minor stuff, got a new porch, that sort of thing. So now I'm gonna have to like totally pick out what I want. I have no sense of interior design whatsoever, so it's going to be really difficult for me. I may end up hiring somebody to do that, in fact. I don't know. And I have a very small kitchen. It's not like it's gonna be huge, and I rather do like the layout. I just have really crappy cabinets that I think are probably from the 80s. And so those definitely need to be replaced. I don't know if I really need to replace any of the appliances, but I'm gonna go have to start looking and making decisions about what I want to do with all of that. So it's not any rush. Obviously it's waited years, it can continue to wait, but I do want to start the wheels moving on that. So that's probably what I'm going to do with my 3-day weekend. So other than that, nothing to talk about really major in life. My recommendations this week though, we had a really lot of great stuff going on, so I kind of had to narrow it down to keep the list from being too long. So I'm just going to point you to, if you somehow missed the flood of reading 10 years of Goodreads Choice Awards, there was a whole playlist put out of all these different channels of varying sizes and styles who read through different genre categories of the Goodreads Choice Awards for the past 10 years of winners. And overall, I think nobody really liked their list. I think for the most part, everyone I've watched so far, I have not watched all of it, there's way too many, and they're all quite long, but they are so worth watching. Interesting, because most of these people do read a lot in the category that they selected, and yet they generally feel like it's not a good representation of that genre or category. So it was a fun project though. Really have enjoyed those. So I will link the playlist to all of the videos down below. It's a ton of great booktubers. I discovered several that I hadn't seen before, so really cool stuff. The other one is Criminali did a great intro video for people who are kind of figuring out booktube and don't know the lingo. So he did a Do You Speak Booktube video that was just great and covers a lot of things that most of us take as, you know, just a given to know what a DNF is, you know, what's a TBR, all of that, sort of the norms of this community. Obviously we create our own language and we have normalized all of it. So once you're in it, you forget that some people might not know what you're talking about. So that was a really great booktube newbie type of video for people that are just sort of onboarding. So really good stuff. I will link that one down below as well. Check out Criminali. So that is it for me this week, I think. Thank you all so very much for watching. As always, I hope if you are in the US or Canada, you should enjoy your 3-day weekend and get some good reading in. I was doing an extra cozy. She's trying to melt. We got a new felloway. It's pheromones for calming cats. And she's just melting into the bed. Look so cozy, my girl. Doesn't look very fancy, but I yet again have zucchini, cabbage, onion, and potato because I both bought, and some rolls with marmalade. But this time with my veggie mix stuff, I have some really lovely Abbott's plant-based chorizo. Stuff is amazingly tasty. You hunting the burps?